player will.
Hey, welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today's the Vivi character review. The character going to be released 2 days from now that I thought I'd get a head start on getting into the character review. A lot of people excited to pull for him. And today's character review, pretty standard things. The character overview, whole stat analysis leading up to the report card where I grade those attributes related to other characters and talk about the general thoughts after that where I can kind of hyper-focus on certain topics. We'll go through the passives and counters, the job abilities, auto priority, a little bit of his TMR review, the vision card eligibility, which is big for Vivi, and then we'll get into the weapon optimization, sample builds, and Truststones. So to start, brand new Dark unit added to the game here. They gave him the unique main job, Kind-Hearted Black Mage with the Blade Soul and Red Mage subjobs. He does equip staves and he's part of the Staff Black Mage category. He does also equip hats, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3, jump of 1 as 100 cost unit. Faith stat recommendation, absolutely 97 as a magic damage dealer. Now, for the main job attributes, he's got a max range of 5 squares away. He's got an even blend of 2 AoEs and 2 single target resistance abilities. And from a weapon resistance standpoint, 25% to strike, keeping with that current trend we're seeing with a lot of newer units. He's also got 15% to slash and 10% to magic, 0 to pierce, a little bit higher than some of the recent average, but the minus 10% to missile. And then from an ailment perspective, because he is a 97 faith unit, you do want to know what he's innately strong against, and it's 50% to paralyze, 50% to stop, and 10% to stun. Maybe not some of my favorites there, but certainly not some of the worst ones either. But for the mastery ability and the 140 ability, on the MA, they gave him 20 magic res pen permanently and 20 crit evasion as well. And the 140, they bumped up his magic stat a fair bit, 20% magic innately, and a permanent decrease of skill activation time of 200. We'll talk about that again in the cast times in just a little bit of the presentation. Now for the stat overview, in terms of base HP, a little bit below that 75th percentile, but overall, still above the average, well above it. Overall, in a pretty good category here related to base HP. Overall, for a mage, I think he's competitive with where many of the other more recent mages have been. From a base magic perspective, also way on the upper tier here. Top 5, definitely top 10 base magic units in the game. That's a super strong point of his. He'll get to very high magic levels because of it. From a base agility perspective, maybe just a smidge below that median, but you can see these groupings. He's pretty right in line with where most of the characters are from a base agility perspective. From the base dexterity perspective, again, it may seem below the lower 25th percentile of where dexterity ranges can go, but related to how many units typically group there, he's not out of the ordinary. So not a strong base dexterity stat, but not like egregiously below where many groupings of characters are either. From a base luck stat, again, kind of near that 75th percentile, just statistically speaking, in terms of what the stat is itself, but it's not enormously above where many of the characters are either. He's basically relegated to this middle. You can even put him in the second bar chart here. I don't really have a segregation between that 180 stat, so definitely skews just a smidge higher on the luck side. I'm probably misrepresenting him just a smidge by putting him in the middle bar, but definitely big thumbs up. Now, as we break down those stats, kind of transform those 5 charts into one here, relative strengths and weaknesses. I wouldn't say there's any real weaknesses per se. We know he has a little bit below average base dexterity, nothing crazy though. And when you add in the board nodes, the board stats, the mastery ability stats, things of that nature, he does get relatively much stronger on the magic side of things than what they do. Retains his luck, actually, which is kind of unique. Not all characters retain their relative standing from a luck perspective, and just takes a little bit of a hit on the HP side of things. They gave him 9 agility points here on the board, which is basically average. Gets him to a decent spot, but overall, I wouldn't say there's really any necessarily weaknesses. HP is a little bit below average, but he's got enough survivability tools that we'll see in the report card that I'm not terribly concerned about that one, all things considered. Now for the agility stats, when you incorporate, main slot and sub-slot vision cards, he does have a passive that you'll likely have equipped almost all the time, so I would look at this green line as a better representation of where he ends up being. Overall, that being said, grouping-wise, he's, I would say, above average on the agility side of things. This is a really decent starting spot for him. I think you're likely to find him in that category more often than not. When we look at crit hit and crit avoid, again, he doesn't really have any crit hit nodes, and his base dexterity is low enough that really not something to focus on the innate critical hit rate. You'll have to really pump in a lot of crit rate externally to get him to a more consistent level, but crit avoidance rate, that 20% from things from his mastery, definitely puts him in the top tier of what most units can achieve from an innate critical avoidance rate. So that's a nice part of his survivability, that he'll just take less overall damage from not being critically hit as often. And from an accuracy perspective, I would say average to below average accuracy, but he does have a guaranteed hit that's very strong. So I'm not terribly worried about the accuracy overall, but innately speaking, not a strong point of his in the least, and no passives to bump it up innately. From the evasion perspective, really at the very bottom end of the gradient here, if you're stress testing your luck stat and evade cards on him, maybe kind of like Black Rose Helena currently, you'll dodge something occasionally if people aren't looking out for it, but really not something you should be expecting, particularly in the builds that you're likely going to put him in. Now for the report card overall, effective HP going with a C here, he's basically average just from an effective HP perspective. 4 Spirit innately, no innate unit res or AoE res, but he does get 12 unit res on a passive, which you likely have on most of the time. So, that being said, ends up being average from total effective HP. But the survivability here, going with an A, he's got re-raise on a passive ability, which means you don't have to buff it. It just starts the battle with re-raise, and he can seal enemy re-raise removal, which is a key component of maybe stopping people from removing that. He is protect capable on his unique weapon they're going to be releasing. He's got an 8% physical damage reduction there, and he's got a 7,500 HP magic barrier as well that he's got access to. He's also got a 40% heal back when he falls below 50% health. So overall, a lot of different ways to survive, not only from just some self-sustain, but he's got some barrier play. He's got good damage reduction mechanics, that re-raise for kind of a get out of jail free card if someone blows you up. But yeah, definitely an A for the survivability. The damage, also going with an A- here. He's got 80 magic res pen post a buff in his kit. He's got 50 spirit pen, which I think is where his upside is really the most limiting. A lot of these magic damage dealers can reach 80 to 90 spirit pen, so he's a little bit below in that regard. That being said, he's got no imperils. His magic stat, although the base stat is very good, it's one of those characters that does need the vision card help to really get up there. There's a variety of ways that characters get to their ending magic stat. A lot of them can be on a passive, some of them are on buffs, some of them are just through the vision cards, and Vivi's one of those that with his vision card, oh yeah, he's going to get to some very high magic levels, but it's really externally driven, not innately driven. Now for the agility, going with the C+ there, if not rounding up just a smidge, but right now his base agility 77 versus 78 average, but when you equip that passive, which you likely will, he'll end up at that 82 almost always, which is a point above the average. His main diamond ability is a 200 CT up as well, so that C+ is a little underrepresented, where the turn order things he'll actually seem a little bit faster than that ending agility value might lead you to believe. Now accuracy, going with a D here, very below average accuracy, but the 100% hit on the main job makes that not an issue. That's a very solid ability that he's got on the main job. Evasion-wise, going with a C here, very difficult evasion potential. You really have to min-max that luck stat and really get a good matchup going into it. From the movement, going with a D here, no movement altering options whatsoever. Not the worst thing in the world, but definitely below average that he doesn't have any access to anything there. The auto ease of use, going with an A here. Now the buffs are relatively straightforward, and his survivability is a nice crutch where you don't have to worry about building them or what's the stats, what's the resistances. He's got enough innate survivability that even just an average player playing them will likely not be terribly affected. And his 100% hit chance makes gearing him very simple. So auto ease of use, I think most people can build him pretty painlessly. And from a game disruption perspective, also going with an A- here, he's a superb Helena supplement and makes a brand new best in slot team. He's a huge dark unit addition too, as an upgrade for many of the magic units they have currently. Overall, he's coming in at a time where I think he's going to get a lot of really good play here. Now the passive's going with an A. He's locked into 2, but they're top tier. Both of them are superb passive abilities. The counter abilities also going with an A here. He's got an excellent 70% chance to proc, slash, and magic damage reduction. He also has a magic reflex option if you wanted to go that way, but I prefer this first one. Now for the overall job and kit grade here, I'm going with an A. Super well-rounded main job, great sub-jobs, really powerful limit break. Up and down, he's a very, very solid unit for a final grade of an A-. Now, I don't think he's a meta driver on his own, but he's a huge addition to it. He's just so reliable in the damage that he does. He's so reliable at some of that survivability that he brings. As a staff Black Mage edition for what those vision cards offer for potential rainbow teams, particularly we consider Helena, the Black Rose, is in that category. That's definitely an A-. It's hard to ignore just how good and how potent he's going to be upon release here. Now for the general thoughts, the penetrations are great, definitely more in the magic res pen. You get 20 from a weapon, 20 from the mastery ability, and 40 from a buff for 3 turns, so that gets you up to 80. That is a sizable amount of magic res pen. The spear pen may be a step back from the ceiling that other units get. A lot of those units have a secondary spirit pen passive. He does not. So 50 is fine, but 50 is not a tank busting amount of spirit pen. That being said, spirit doesn't tend to get that high in the game, but Again, we're talking about game balance things. There's no reason why they couldn't release a tank like Summer Glass Yellow, but a magic version where they get up to 80 spirit, if you know what I mean. And that would definitely see him take a hit on the damage output. But other than that, great self-sustainability. The weapon gives that 8% physical damage reduction. The passive gives the self-re-raise for free, and you can seal the re-raise removal upon hit to enemies. He's got that 40% HP recovery, self-protect on main, and the Blade Soul sub has that 7500 magic barrier. So talked about that in survivability, just really re-emphasizing all the key attributes of that here. And he does have some great utility as well. He's got haste optionality that also has 20 unit res on his red mage sub, which is a great flexible ability option for him. He's got Dispel Shell on an AoE, which is also that 100% hit. He's got Re-Raise removal on his 120 ability. That Protect that he can give himself, he can also give that to teammates. He's got a 40 decrease of elemental chain res, which when you consider mono dark, and combining that with, let's say, Raph's Limit Break, which continues elemental chain. This is a great damage amplification, and the stun on the Limit Break to be able to AoE make everyone just miss a turn is obviously really powerful from a utility perspective as well. He's also got other great X factors. On his weapon, one of the factors is that his CT cannot be decreased. So going against characters like Bridal Elia, who has that 20 CT down, or 20% CT down, he will not get affected by that. Very powerful. We know how game-breaking that mechanic is. And the Blade Soul, although not my favorite thing, does have great slash synergy when you talk about, let's say, mono dark and what they do for slash damage. But one of the abilities there is a dispel mechanic. Now it's relying on critical hit, so not Vivi's strong point. But again, X Factor, thinking outside the box here, there's a lot more to him as well. Now I do think he's a top tier addition to Staff Black Mage. He is best in slot with Black Rose Helena in terms of best black mages in the category, and he's a huge supplement to her because you get a second re-raise seal capability. Not only does Helena have it, but Vivi has it, so you have two different times that you're able to potentially seal that on your enemies. He can Dispel Shell for her, which he cannot do innately. Hasting her or himself has a huge advantage for damage output, and his 100% hit definitely helps her, where her own accuracy is really subpar. She's relegated to the Holy ability on the White Mage sub, but the fact that he can bring a guaranteed hit alleviates the burden on her to kind of carry that torch. So huge supplement to her. And just a very quick note, if you were to equip Defense or Spirit Truststone passives and a 10% healing power passive, that increases his 40% heal back to 56% heal back. So definitely something that I'm potentially recommending here, that when you talk about that self-sustainability, that's a huge increase in health restored. Now, as you get into the passive abilities, again, these are two top tier ones that, although the other ones are really good, I think these two are the best. His main one is a decreased activation skill time of 400, so he'll have perma, 600 spell cast time down. That's also his auto revive, that's the 12 unit res, and that's the 40% HP recovered. Now, the second one I like here is the agility of 12%. That's also his spirit pen of 40 and the crit rate of 12. I cannot imagine not equipping both of these. Although the others are here, I really don't see an opportunity where you'll ever use them. These two both do things for survivability and damage in ways that most other characters can't achieve innately. Now for the counter abilities, you do have a couple options. You know, the magic reflex, I'm sure some people really like, but I do like the preemptive double return. That's just a flat preemptive offensive ability with a decent range to just do some magic damage when you're going to receive slash and magic damage. So it's a really good survivability option that you might hit an enemy before they hit you. We've seen Bridal Elia use this a lot, where her counter ability will oftentimes kill an enemy before they have the option to attack her. So that is a form of survivability when you consider just how potent that damage can be. But certainly the magic reflex in this timing of the meta is a really good one as well. And for the main job buffs, the teammate buff that he'll prioritize is that Protect for himself and allies. It also will grant that effect of sealing re-raise here, and the magic res pen of 40. And then his self buff is a further decreased skill of activation time. That'll bring him down to 800. It's also a 40% magic buff and 50 reaction block rate, which he did not have anywhere so far in his kit. So this is a very, very good second buff overall. When we get to the main job and their attributes, you know, we got 2 AoE, 2 unit res, 3 of them have cast times here, so we'll talk about the cast times in just a couple moments. But overall, you know, 5 squares away is the max range. He's got that reduced counter chance of 100 on this ability, so if you don't get it off on the buff, you can at least get it off on this low AP ability at the end of a fight. You won't use it early on. But Double Darka is that Dispel Shell and the 100% hit chance. It's a double hit on that cross-shaped AoE. And Meteor 2 is a decrease of elemental chain res on a giant diamond. That's a 220% mod, so he'll likely use this most often. He'll also restore CT of 200 to himself, so very powerful ability. And finally, Flare is a single target ability that will dispel auto re-raise on a 260% mod, but it's a typeless ability, so it will not take any dark attack up. It will only do magic attack up. Overall, really healthy balance of different kinds of attacks here and different sizes, different range and heights. 2 thumbs up for what they did for the offensive variability here on the main job. And his limit break, another diamond-shaped 5 square away ability. It's a 20% magic damage increase for 3 turns after using it, and is an AoE stun effect as well at 67% chance. So this is a very, very powerful limit break, not only for his own damage amplification, but making them miss a turn if you're able to stun those enemies. Now for the cast time breakpoints, a couple things here. Number one, if you consider him just bare bones with the 140 ability and the passive ability, that's 600, he's innately at 2 ticks for all of his offensive abilities here. I included Bio, which is on the sub job we'll see in a second. If you were to give him the Truststone passive of 200, which you should, that'll bring him down to 1 tick. Now I know he's got that cast time down on the buff, but that could be dispelled, it might wear off, you might not get the buff off, there's a lot of variability there, but just putting on a Truststone passive automatically brings him to that single cast time. And if you have that buff applied of 200, I use the Esper here, but theoretically if you have that buff, that 200 down, that makes him functionally insta-cast, so his cast time breakpoints are pretty exceptional that he can basically get to 0 very, very easily, or at worst case, 1 tick with just that Truststone passive. So really smart what they did for the cast time there. Now for the sub-jobs here, the Kind-Hearted Black Mage, I don't love this sub-job. This is a chance to poison, and it's a decrease of spirit, but it's post damage here. It's another typeless ability. It's got that cast time 360, 185% mod, so it's a lower mod on average than the main job. And the Petrify ability, I don't think is good at all for auto PvP because he's got that 100% hit chance. So if he was innately an inaccurate character and you didn't turn on that 100% hit chance, he might use this against evade units, but even then 15% chance is a very low proc rate. I don't think this sub-job really adds anything that the main job doesn't already do very well, which brings us to the second sub-job here, the Blade Soul, where I really like the barrier here. I think that's a ton of great HP to essentially reduce damage for. And the Slash Res Pen, again, I don't love all of the abilities on here, but when you consider that Mono Dark has a lot of slash attack up, there's a lot of Slash Res Pen on the Anima Vision card, which you might put in there. If you're going for some of these and the AI is trying to min-max damage, this is a really cool option, but I do think a very big underrated X factor is just the Red Mage one here, where not only do you have Cura as a healing option for second Guild War fights, but the fast cast is really an exceptional ability here for not only the decrease of skill activation time, but it's really more so than that the haste and the unit res that comes with it. If you can use this on a teammate or on himself, this is a significant buff to turn order and survivability. So this Red Mage sub is a very smart one. I think this is probably my favorite to play with in terms of getting that haste in various ways to various teammates. Now for the TMR review, this is a hat, so it takes the place of a cloth, if you will. Overall stats on it for a hat, very weak. I'll just say that much. This is not really any kind of strong stats for something that takes up the place of a cloth. It's got the 2 casts, it's a teammate buff, it's a 25% agility buff, and it dispels AP restore on enemies upon hit. I think this is relatively weak, all things considered. I think if this was an accessory, I'd like it a lot more. Obviously, an accessory always is better because you can equip 2 of them. You don't have to worry about giving up the optionality of equipping a cloth. But overall, 25% agility. There's a lot of characters that have this innately as a buff. It's never been terribly, terribly overpowering. It's really good, but I don't think it's enough to really overcome what other TMR options you have, or making sure that he, uses that haste buff instead. I think that's far more impactful. And even for other characters outside of Vivi, I don't really see a big upside here. AP restore abilities are not as overpowering as they once were. Definitely more of a niche TMR in my opinion. Now, as you get to the job-based vision cards here, now Staff Black Mage has some great overlap on a handful of amazing vision cards. The one that I've highlighted in green here are ones that have either agility up or AoE res or unit res. Most of their vision cards have that, which make them not only excellent mono parties, but excellent rainbow parties. And they have a ton of overlap with a variety of classes here. I mean, Axe notably has 4 different vision cards you can overlap with them. Book is getting a really good buff here with them where they overlap on 3 different of them. Katana and Sword Warrior are also really good ones, but there's a bunch of different options here depending upon what kind of vision cards you want to prioritize. That's one of the best things about this class at the moment. And by Vivi's self-sustainability and self-survivability, not really having to rely on a lot of external help, makes him an optimal rainbow unit. You can just kind of plop him in any team and he's going to perform exceptionally well. And yeah, if we're just taking a second to evaluate a lot of these vision cards, I mean, his is definitely best in slot for his. It's a massive upgrade to this class where before that, you were really limited to the Dwayne vision card, which is good, but it's a little more limited for classes. There's a future vision card coming out here, but that's an MR rated one, so statistically not as significant, but his is really a big driver. It's got, I would argue, 2 out of the 4 things you should always look at with the area res and the reaction ability, but the rest of these offer so many other great things here, from various kinds of resistances that you can use. The Halloween Lucia has that strike res and man killer, which can be paired with the greater demon on a sub slot if you were going with a different agility card on the main slot. There's so many iterations of vision cards here. It's one of my favorite things to theorycraft with for this class. Now we get to the weapon optimization here. It's really hard not for me to recommend this one for him, where you get that 20 magic res pen. That one's okay, it's replaceable, but that's still a big part of his penetration. It's really the physical damage reduction of 8%. That can't be understated how great that is for all kinds of damage, but it's really the immunity to CT down, which is another great X factor. There are obviously other great stabs to potentially consider. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the Wizard Rod, where you get that CT up, but he's already got enough CT up in his abilities on that diamond that I don't think this is necessarily as big of a competitive advantage as some of the others, but still, we've seen time and time again, this is such a good one. I just think that the 8% physical damage reduction is probably a little more superior to this from what Vivi wants to do, but there are also other staff options where if you wanted to go with something like the Staff of Providence as a TMR option, I always recommend this, where this is that unit res of 10 when you talk about min-maxing your magic stat on the TMR and getting some survivability layered in here. But even something like the Platinum Staff, that 10% agility below a certain health point, I don't think that gets as much usage, so I'm kind of sticking to these 3, but stabs by and large all have excellent options. Even something like the Magistral Rod at this moment, where you can get that dark res and light res of 7%, or it might be 8%, when you consider the meta of what many of these teams are running. Vivi's got a ton to choose from, but I'm probably sticking with his main staff as my main recommendation. And just for the Trials of Reckoning future, you know, we're talking about that unit res. You can also get that here on this Trial of Reckoning item, where not only you get the 10 unit res, you get more crit evasion for Vivi, another 20, so leaning into that strength. And for him, he'll get 20 human killer on all his abilities for those magic attacks, and he'll essentially get I won't call it a permanent resistance because it's 50%, but all intents and purposes, even against limit breaks, you have the option that you're more than likely going to very much reduce the odds of them afflicting you. But Poison and Berserk res. Now Poison, sure, Soul's Limit Break might still get you on some RNG, but the Berserk that we're really seeing is from the Vega TMR primarily, and that 25% chance makes this so that it never happens. So this is actually a really good TOR item. I think is an argument which ends up being best. But let's get into these sample builds now, and I'm going to start off here with Mono Dark, and we're going to use Raph and Sephiroth. If it's a yellow box here, that means I think it's a flexible option. You'll see in a second when I equip the other things. The TMR option here is flexible, but I think the Dark Fina Vision card here, you could probably play with something else if you wanted. I just like this one for the extra magic that it gives. The dexterity is certainly nice for that crit rate that he's a little bit lower on. But you could certainly go a variety of ways here. I have his new vision card here in the main slot. I have that Greater Demon, which affects all 3 of these units. Anima's there for that slash res pen for Sephiroth, and the unit res obviously, and that Omega subvision card is great for the magic resistance as well. You know, I currently have that Marshmallow artifact on because there's so many status effects going on currently that, yeah, for Vivi, you want to be careful of that. I have his own rod equipped, and I have the Dialdo TMR here just from a speed perspective. You could really put any speedier TMR in here. I'm not expecting him to use the TMR ability. It's really more of a stat stick at this time. And when we look at the Truststones that I put on him, I did put the HP set on, so I did not go defense or spirit here, which I do recommend though. But for the agility set on the right side, again, I want Vivi to really get that extra agility if possible. I have some pretty standard things here. The magic 20%, the spirit pen 10. I have that 200 decrease of skill time, the 10 healing power, dexterity of 15%, and the crit rate of 10. Because again, I really want to try to amplify some of that crit rate potential just for damage min maxing. But when you look at the total stats, all things considered, 9,700 HP is a really good spot here. He's at 1,800 magic. He's got 17 spirit here innately. When you're looking at all-around resistances, 32 unit res, 27 AoE res. He's at 32% reaction block rate, which will be 82% if he uses that second buff of his. He's got some great niches here for resistances in terms of the 39% slash res, the 56% strike res, the 20% magic res. He's got a bunch of immunities due to that marshmallow accessory. Some great mods here. You know, you're looking at 73 dark attack, 15 magic attack, and 30 human killer, 55 spirit pen, and 40 magic res pen. Overall stats, I am very happy with where this Vivi ends up when you consider he's also got the re-raise. He's got the self-heal. He's got the 8% physical damage reduction. There's a lot to like here. Not even considering what he would look like if you were to, those you that really like him, max reincarnate him, where you're talking about an extra 1800 HP here, bumps him up to your 1100, and you're going to surpass that 2k magic stat, which obviously is very powerful. But the second team, and this is, I didn't do a full stat breakdown of this, but there is a superior team to this, and it's really subbing out Sephiroth for Helena the Black Rose. And when you do that, you would essentially change that Dark Fina vision card to a Ramuh vision card so that Helena also gets the magic buff. You would sub out that Anima main slot vision card, and you would do either Odin or Nightmare Before Halloween. The problem with the Nightmare Before Halloween is that Raph is not on it, so you might go Odin so everyone gets it. And Helena's magic stat and damage is strong enough, you're really not sacrificing a ton by doing that. And then you might sub the Omega vision card for something like Shinryu, where you get that area weakening resistance. So there's a couple different ways to do this, but if you were to swap in Helena for here, Vivi's stats overall don't change a ton. You're still going to maintain most of the same stats. It's just that this team with Helena, Raph, and Vivi, in my opinion, is likely going to be much stronger than the Sephiroth one. But the Sephiroth iteration is still a very viable option for a variety of other teams. So I wanted to go for more of a different kind of rainbow concept here, where yes, we know Helena is a great third option to kind of mingle some classes, but I wanted to give some love to Dagger here, who, you know, coming off the heels of my review where she may not have seemed that impressive stat-wise, she gets a huge benefit here from Vivi's vision card. And so just kind of maintaining much of the same, where, you know, I'm using much of that same build I just recommended in terms of using Odin here on Dagger on the main slot. I have the Inherited Wills sub-vision card here, which gives everyone HP and the extra reaction block rate. That's that Ramuh sub in here that I was just talking about a second ago. So this is functionally how I would tune the team if I put Helen in here, but I wanted to throw in a different concept where, again, if you're talking anti-magic, Dagger brings in some extra sustainability. She brings in some of the Spirit Imperils. But for Vivi in particular, the stats, when you're looking at adjusting some of these vision cards, it's not a huge fall off. You're still at roughly 9,000 HP. You're getting just slightly less because you're losing out on some of the mastery from losing Sephiroth and some of the vision card swaps, but still 9,000 HP. You're looking at over 17,000 magic still. The rest of the stats here, 119 agility. That last build, he was 118 agility, so he's still exceptionally fast, all things considered. The resistances really haven't changed much. You lose a little bit on the dark attack modifiers, but that's okay. He still maintains a lot of these great resistances to slash and strike. A little bit of a decrease here in the magic res because you're losing out on Omega. But still, stat speaking, he's right in this sweet spot for a lot of these attributes. The Spirit really relatively unchanged as well. And the Dagger honorable mention of what this Vivi vision card does for her, it gets her up to 8,700 HP, 1,500 magic just north of that, and 115 agility, which these stats are far superior to what you might have seen in my Dagger builds on that own review, where Vivi's vision card here and what that does for her is a substantial increase to the HP and the magic for her that she doesn't achieve in most other places, and greatly affects her rainbow viability as well. So that's kind of like a follow-up honorable mention that I wanted to wrinkle in here. Now for the Truststones, you know, left side, I had HP in that build, but Spirit and Defense are definitely still great recommendations. Just for the extra healing power. Obviously, it takes a little bit of min-maxing with the stats to make sure you get that right. On the agility side, for the right side, you saw already what I recommended for my personal 6. I think these are all great ones here. If you were to sub in any of them, you might go for the dark attack or the accuracy angle. But all things considered, I don't think the extra Dark Attack 10 is really worth giving up the crit rate upside that you're getting from this final one. I think the heal power is very important. I think the cast time down is important to make sure you maintain that one tick capability. And the accuracy 10 is kind of whatever, considering he's already got the guaranteed hit. And he's inaccurate enough. I don't think 10% is going to really help you in that evasion matchup. But that's the Vivi review altogether. Again, really solid character. A lot of people that are excited for him will not be disappointed. He comes in at an exceptional time. He's a huge addition to the cast of Staff Black Mage. His vision card is a potential game-changing vision card for what you can do, not only for him, but for the game in general. And so I'm looking forward to his release. Hopefully you are too, and that's all I got to say for now. So thanks for watching, everybody. I'll talk to you all later.